Hello, my name is Jack Hintz, and this is my Black as the Body Motherland chapter reflection. Excuse the beanie, it's just kind of cold in here, and I don't really feel like going to turn on the heat, so this is where I'm at right now. So it starts off by introducing us. The chapter starts by introducing us to Helen. Excuse me, their adoption liaison. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm sorry. She's on the phone with Emily at a hotel in Quebec City while they're on vacation to celebrate her birthday, and you can kind of tell immediately the audience kind of get clued in that Helen's kind of like an annoying character. She was described as wearing vibrant dresses, talking very loud, telling stories of success, and she sat down with Emily at a picnic table and kind of talked about a couple of things. Emily sees John talking to another family at the time, sees the teenage son's boredom. It's like another interracial couple, and she sees the teenage son's boredom. And the father, who was described as a very tall, dark man, reacts to it by saying, "This is great," with a face of pure joy. And she can't really tell if that means like having a son or having a son who's so bored and just being a dad in this moment. Emily and John stopped being stopped being charmed by Helen's coarse nature after this. They stayed by her, and they figured out that it worked eventually, as they got their two daughters out of this person eventually. They go through the story of how the twins got their names and their middle names, and how they settled on Julia and Isabella, and how they settled on the pronunciation and the spelling, because both her and John kind of disagreed at first, but they eventually worked it out. And the agency then connects Ethiopia. The agency connected to Ethiopia, fires Helen, and Helen goes and says things like the agency's corrupt. She basically goes off defending herself, and the agency basically tells them not to communicate with her anymore, telling them to cancel the meeting between families that Helen had originally scheduled. So Emily, after as much as she wants to, she can't turn away from Helen though. She's connected to her through basically her children that are her future posterity, and she's like, I need to stay by Helen. So she tells her that she left the agency. She lies to Helen. She's like, yep, I left the agency, and now I'm not associating with them anymore. It introduces us to Addis Adaba and Jonas, the Ethiopian liaison. I think that's how it's pronounced. And Esther, the woman from the plane, she owns a textile factory and makes shawls, blankets, and cloths for with her and her twin. And it describes the conversation that her and Emily have with this very soft-spoken woman who makes cloths and stuff like that. And then Elysior, I'm not sure that's how it's pronounced, but the cab driver is described with large smoky eyes, a sharp face, and the stories about him driving around basically for the week and being their own personal driver. She talks about Africa and how Emily never really thought of adopting from there. She said it was, when she thought about Africa, all she thought about was the famine, the poverty, and the war. As the plane takes off, she's thinking about these details. When they land, she's talking about the Jeep ride that her and John are taking with his family, and talking about how Nora Jones is playing in the background. And this, I'm going to stop real quick. This was just a really cool detail for me because Nora Jones went to the same elementary school as I did. Like, way before I did, but, like, she went to the same elementary school as I did, and she grew up in the same town as I did. So seeing that name in there was really cool. It kind of, like, grounded me in it. As a reader, I was just like, holy shit, like, Nora Jones is actually in this chapter. Like, that was kind of just, like, I was kind of blown away from it. And I was like, wow, it's a real connection I have with the book, kind of. I guess that's the best way to describe it. Emily continues describing the vivid detail of Adigrat's route, which is also, I think, was my favorite part of the chapter. The language and diction she uses. She said that Helen described the girls as having no birthday, but the cousins saying that today is the day whenever they were in the car, and they're like, this is their birthday. And so Emily writes that down real quick. And I think the one detail I wrote down that I was really impressed by was she saying the sand beneath her feet was as light as packed brown sugar. That was a very strong visual element I really could kind of grasp with that, and that was a really cool moment. I was a really big fan of that. She talks about the Donkhill, I'm not really sure how it's pronounced, Donkhill Depression they're in. It's near the equator. Emily talks about the heat and how she laughs it off, but eventually she says the heat kind of like finds its way on her head and her scalp and like that. And usually she was thinking about how she would want to go find shade immediately or AC, but she's saying, this is right where I want to be. I'm here for my children, and I don't care how hot I am right now. I'm here for my kids. The girl's family, when they arrive, they found it. The girl's family slaughtered a sheep in their honor, and Emily tried it, and she wasn't a big fan of it, and she felt really bad. She kind of felt the eyes looking at her as she was like making the face of like, I like this, but like I just can't eat it. She met Isabella and Julia, and they were shocked by John's white skin, but it was a beautiful moment between the two of them. Julia cries as Isabella is like silent on the Archer's journey back. They're in different cars or meeting different people. Julia is just crying, and Isabella is just kind of like just stoic, really not really saying much. They arrived at the airport sweaty and covered in the vomit from the goat milk that they drank earlier. The kids basically threw up on them. And Isabella and Emily share, this is another kind of important moment in this chapter, Isabella and Emily share their first private joke as she kind of like looks around the airport doing one of these faces, and then she looks up and laughs at her, and so that was a cool moment between mother and daughter. She falls asleep on the plane, and then Emily describes waking up and feeling absolutely awful, running to the bathroom and like, basically saying, take my child to this flight attendant. And I think she's sick from the milk they were given, the unpasteurized milk. And so She then tells more stories about the hotel in Addis, I believe that's how it's pronounced. She talks about the white men in military gear and berets, and how they're there because Ethiopia entered another epic war with Somalia. And she said that she doesn't really like it. She's kind of annoyed by this, and it really affects her time in Addis with her children. Helen calls them angry, whining about her knee. Helen's just furious at this point. She's just, her and John don't like Helen. Like, she finds him in the hotel one day and tells him not to tell Jonas. They're greeting her, and they're all like, "Hey, Helen, good to see you." But in their mind, they're just like, "I fucking hate this lady. Like, go away, Helen. You try to get our kids kicked away." And embassy agent says, they go to the embassy agent, and they're talking to them, and the embassy agent's like, "Did you work with Helen Franklin?" And they're like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Okay, yeah, the case needs to be reinvestigated." And Emily learns that the girls may never be hers. They get them eventually, but for a moment there, she really thought that Helen would be the one who would take away her children, and that was a pretty shocking moment. And that was, I really kind of felt the emotions Emily was feeling, and that was pretty emotional as well. That was a really hard section to read, because she was just breaking down and crying and just in a million pieces, but she looks at Julia, and Julia's just like, what? Like, Julia is such an innocent little child. She's like, "I don't understand. Like, why are you just lighten up, lady? Like, why are you crying?" That was a very powerful moment for me. I really grappled onto that. That was nice. She then talks about Marjorie and Linda, some more agency representatives from the United States, how they're walking and they're eating breakfast together, and Emily wishes she could hold a sign that says, "I'm not associated with them," or so I think it's like, she doesn't own us, something like that. They walk through the hotel, and this is yet again one of the more powerful moments of the story, hearing people behind the bar talking about white people who come here and steal our children. I think Emily's like, they can't be talking about me, no way. But like, again, even if they're not talking about him or her or John or anything like that, it's just a very powerful moment, because it shows the homeland and the motherland where Julie and Isabella come from, and how they're gonna always be in a different mindset than her mother and father. She talks about more time they spend with Elysiar and Aster in the Zebra Cafe. Emily's watching as this, they're not really paying attention. Emily's not really paying attention to what they say. She's watching this Italian couple outside yelling and screaming and arguing, and she's like, man, you kind of get the impression, like, the reader gets the impression that, like, Emily's like, our no relationship is perfect, and like, maybe one day I'll have to grapple with this kind of thing. Before the flight, Emily and a shopkeeper talk about how she feels lucky rather than good to have this adopted her child from Adigrat. She puts her hand over her heart, and so does the shopkeeper, and they kind of acknowledge that, these are her daughters, and this is a really powerful moment as well. It kind of ends the chapter where it started and says, like, you know what I mean, like, not everyone's going to accept it, but these are my children, and it's how it's going to be forever.